Hello and welcome back to another week's analysis behind the news. Following on the heels of the Brexit vote, globalists are just salivating to strong-arm the United Kingdom to get sucked back into their plans of world domination. Kinda sounds like a comic book plot, doesn't it? Well, unfortunately, the globalist supervillains are moving ahead to do what they can to sabotage the vote. And keep in mind, so far nothing, except for a symbolic vote, has happened. The UK is still in the EU and will be until 2 years after Act 50 is initiated. And the current Prime Minister is not going to implement Act 50. He claims he is stepping down in October and will let the next Prime Minister do that. The New American reports a long litany of these supervillains, each with their own ideas of sabotaging the vote, including conducting a second Brexit vote, ignoring the first vote, using the results of the first vote as leverage to get a better deal with the EU, basically anything they can do to block the exit. In this country, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan took to the airwaves with the suggestion to President Obama that he immediately take the opportunity to negotiate a trade deal with the UK. Is Ryan naive about these trade deals, or is he doing his part to ensure that the globalist agenda continues? Look at it this way. Ryan was part of the inaugural class educated by the Aspen Institute. This institute began as the Aspen Institute of Humanistic Studies. If you're unsure what humanism is, it's well worth your while to look it up. These are the types of people that push immorality and strip God out of every situation. This is very dangerous to our Judeo-Christian based foundation. The Institute is funded by the likes of the Carnegie Corporation, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, the Gates Foundation, the Lumina Foundation, and the Ford Foundation. When you think of that smoky backroom deal that feature fat cat politicians lighting cigars with bundles of cash, getting cozy with corporate elites, these people are it. They know full well the agenda behind the free trade agreements. The Aspen Institute is also a part of the cooperating institutions of the Transatlantic Policy Network, along with the Council on Foreign Relations. The Transatlantic Policy Network goal is to see the political and economic merging of the US and the EU. So Ryan knows full well what he is doing, as well as who he is accountable to. Because of the pressure from potential voters, Hillary Clinton says she is opposed to these free trade deals. Yet history demonstrates her objections can easily be overcome by a tweaking here and there of the text before she becomes a full supporter. But what about the opposite side of the political aisle? From a brief scan of the headlines, Donald Trump is made to sound like a bircher in his stance against globalization and free trade. And regardless of your thoughts, my thoughts, or anyone's thoughts on Trump, his rhetoric on this subject is refreshing to hear. The Washington Times reported part of his speech in Pennsylvania. "This is not some natural disaster. It is politician-made disaster," Mr. Trump said of a decline in manufacturing over decades. "It is the consequence of a leadership class that worships globalism over Americanism." Now, when's the last time you heard a politician talk about Americanism? "Globalism has made the financial elite who donate to politicians very wealthy. But it has left millions of our workers with nothing but poverty and heartache," he said. Now, who among us wouldn't stand up to shout amen to that? However, as JBS has said over and over again, campaign rhetoric and political record are rarely the same. So while it sounds good, we have no guarantee that his rhetoric would become policy under a Trump administration or even pursued by a like-minded Congress. And speaking of Trump, at the Aspen Institute's Ideas Festival this last weekend, Mitt Romney made the claim that he would not and could not vote for either of the two frontrunners, even suggesting that he was going to write in his wife's name. He also mentions that he was going to be working with others who wouldn't be voting for either of these two. So what exactly does that mean? Lou Dobbs was suggesting that there might be a chance of Paul Ryan getting drafted as a candidate. Now, given the hit that globalists took in the UK, wouldn't it be fitting if they continue their offense here and get their guy in? And it's interesting of Romney's involvement, though. Are you aware of his dad's involvement in derailing the campaign of Senator Barry Goldwater from his trajectory to the 1964 presidential nominee for the Republican Party? Establishment Republicans George Romney and Nelson Rockefeller did all they could to destroy Goldwater and future constitutionalists from being elected. Our next member bulletin gets more into this. So just know that there's plenty of family precedents set on Romney's side as far as ensuring that the establishment gets its candidate. Also after the Brexit vote, President Obama joined the Prime Minister of Canada and the President of Mexico for the North American Leader Summit, which began as a Security and Prosperity Partnership with the previous President George W. Bush. The overall goal here is to politically and economically merge the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. So out of this meeting, the three amigos, as the press calls them, have agreed upon a new North American climate and energy plan. Bloomberg reports the North American Climate, Clean Energy, and Environment Partnership, announced by the leaders of the three countries in Ottawa at the beginning of the Three Amigos Summit, seeks to impose new restrictions on some industries in an effort to cut emissions and spur a greener economy on the heels of last year's Paris Climate Summit. The meeting is also expected to see the leaders stress the importance of trade, economic integration, and open societies amid fallout over the Brexit vote and a rise in protectionist sentiment, including in the U.S. Let that sink in a minute. Stress the importance of trade, economic integration, and open societies amid a fallout over the Brexit vote and a rise in protectionist sentiment, including here in the U.S. If loving your country enough to protect it warrants being labeled protectionist, then so be it, count me in. Because the opposite of this is what those in the UK are mired in now. And this is the route the U.S. is headed if we continue accepting that outside authority trumps constitutional authority. And regarding trade, in 1955, free trade advocate Dr. Lewis Lloyd wrote a book on free trade, and because of his research, found himself reversing his support. He found that in order for trade to be free and fair, 8 conditions needed to be met. The first 7 dealt with taxes, business ethics, wage rates, and business laws, among others. Yet number 8 was striking. It stated that the above 7 conditions would need to be enforced by a world government. He was not an advocate of world government, so his tune changed real quick regarding free trade. Yet, with so many Republicans supporting these deals, are they all world government advocates? Absolutely not. But their leaders definitely are. And depending on who we are talking to, the intended or the unintended ramifications of free trade require us to have a much larger discussion that involves sovereignty, liberty, and the longevity of our republic. And for more on this, we highly recommend that you read International Merger by Foreign Entanglements, available from shopjbs.org. And wouldn't you agree that this discussion is much needed and long overdue, especially as we celebrate Independence Day? If Britain can declare its independence, don't you think we should too? Let's defeat those free trade agreements and let's get out of the United Nations. It's high time for our own Brexit. Bring on the Amexit. Until next week, we'll see you then.